Hi, my name is Stacy. I stood in front of a group of women today and gave a talk about low self-esteem, and I really felt at the end that I needed to record it and share it. So that is what I'm doing. I stood in front of a group of women today speaking about low self-esteem, and if you would have told me even just a year ago that I was going to be doing that, I would not have believed you. I would have said that I needed to be in the chair sitting and listening rather than at the front teaching. Yet there I was, talking about God's goodness. God has brought me such a long way. There was a time where I stayed in my dorm room for 2 full weeks without leaving because I just couldn't face the world. I, ate my little ramen noodles in my hot pot and mac and cheese and begged people to bring me food because I just could not leave my room. I could not bear to look at the world or have the world look at me. I had days, even after I was married, where I literally hid in my closet, hid in that safe space, because I was just so afraid. But here I am, and I stood in front of that group today, slightly tongue-tied, but not at all needing that closet, not at all needing that safe space. Like I said, my name is Stacy, but I haven't always called myself that. At one time, I changed my name to Worthless. I allowed other people and my circumstances determine who I was. I was mistreated, beaten down emotionally, and abandoned by friends and family, people who were supposed to love me. I was told by their actions that I was worthless and unlovable. So I believed that's who I was. It was how I approached life, how I approached people. I put on a mask. I held them at arm's length. I expected every man in my life to hurt me just as the one prior. I expected my friends to turn on me and make fun of me behind my back. When I walked into a room, I assumed everyone around was talking about me. But really, how self-centered is that? To assume that everyone is focused on me, honestly. I also named myself fearful. I lived in such a state of fear and anxiety I could barely function. I was afraid people would see my dysfunction, like I was wearing it like a robe. I had such social anxiety I could barely breathe in large crowds. To even sit in the lunchroom today with all of those women at one point would have given me such anxiety I wouldn't have been able to breathe. But I stood in front of them today and I opened the group and I spoke with confidence. God has brought me such a long way. My very first job, I was a hostess at Baker Square, and on my first day I had to run to the bathroom and have an anxiety attack because there was just too much going on. My first day at college, going into the dining hall and getting food, again, I had to run to the bathroom and breathe and have an anxiety attack. I was just so fearful. I was constantly worrying that people were judging me, judging my outfits, judging my hair, the way that I walked, my life choices. I named myself insignificant. I allowed people to bully me. I allowed friends and boyfriends to make me feel less. I wasn't as smart as one in computers. I wasn't as worldly and cultured as another. They made me feel small and stupid, and I let them. What do you let people call you? Do you allow people to make you feel small? Do you allow those around you to determine your worth? When you look in that mirror, what do you see looking back at you? What names do you call yourself? Your name, what you call yourself, is significant, for it denotes status and notoriety, some strength. You hear the name Matthew McConaughey, and you immediately say to yourself, or at least I do, all right, all right, all right. You hear the name Jackie Kennedy, and you think of poise and grace and pearls. I say Muhammad Ali, and you think power and strength. I say the name Jesus, and you think of peace and a savior. Transversely, some people's names conjure up thoughts of weakness. I say O.J. Simpson, and you think of the car chase. I say Tanya Harding, and you think of that bat. So it's no wonder when you call yourself worthless, people begin to treat you that way. You are emanating that very character trait. You portray yourself as weak, and people will push you around. You live like a victim, and people will treat you like one. I read a statistic somewhere that if you have been a victim of a robbery, you are 9 times more likely for that to happen again. because we live in the state of victimhood. When I was young, I was a happy, outgoing child. I would talk to anyone. I would make friends easily, but at some point I changed my name. I felt so low that I couldn't even look people in the eye. I would walk around with my head down. I used to work at Target during Christmas time, and everyone would come up to you and they'd be like, I need to find this toy or what have you, and I'd go off and I'd grab it and I'd come back and realize, I don't know who I'm looking for. I never looked them in the eye. I never looked them in the face. I just had to stand there and hold this toy and hope someone would find me. That's just no way to live. I used to be loud and boisterous, but at some point I began to quiet and fade into the background. I hoped against hope that someone would see me and validate me and make me feel wanted. I just felt so invisible. At some point I realized I needed help and I reached out. I was told to speak positive things to myself in the mirror. Great advice. However, I just sat there and looked at that mirror and I just cried because I couldn't find not one thing that I liked about myself that I thought was positive. I could rattle you off a list a mile long of everything that I wasn't. I was a failure. I was a procrastinator. I was ugly. I was fat. I was whatever. Long laundry list of everything I wasn't. I couldn't do anything right. I mean, I guess I did like my hair, so I guess that is one thing that I liked about myself. That's positive, right? Finally, God got a hold of me, and He changed my name. He said I was a child of the King. He said I was His princess. I liked the sound of that. I can't say that it was a flick of the switch that I changed, but it was little by little. I acknowledged that I didn't like where I was or how I felt. I finally gave myself permission to be visible. I began to stand up straighter and hold my head up high, reminding myself that I was allowed to be there. I wasn't encroaching on anyone else's territory. I had every right to breathe the same air as everyone else. When God changes your name, it's with a purpose. It's to change your identity. God changed Abram's name to Abraham, from high father to father of multitudes. He changed Sarai's name to Sarah, from my princess to mother of nations. Now, neither of them had bad names, but they just didn't reflect the destiny that God had for them. He wanted Abraham to understand he wasn't just a father, but a father of nations. These weren't the only names that God changed. He changed Jacob's name to Israel, which meant having power with God. He changed Simon to Peter, which meant rock. He was changing their identity. And not only did it change the way they saw themselves, but it changed how everyone around them saw them as well. It's time we allow God to name us instead of those around us or even ourselves. Those names that we allow others to call us is not what God has for us. He calls you His child. He calls you His friend. He says you have been set free. He calls you His chosen. He says you are redeemed and you are forgiven. He says you are His masterpiece, His creation. He knew every sin you would commit before you did, and He loves you still. He calls you His beloved. Now, I'm not saying this transformation is quick or even easy, because it's not. But it's time to allow yourself to be visible. Allow yourself to be present instead of fading into the background. God created you in His image. He knit you together in your mother's womb. He gave you your talents, your interests, your looks, and God does not make mistakes. Who you are is who you are for a reason. It's time to embrace that, faults and all. We look at the people around us, celebrities especially, and we want to be just like them. We think if we were just thin enough, if we were just pretty enough, that we'd feel better about ourselves. I'm here to tell you this is a heart matter and not an appearance matter. We see snapshots of other people's lives. We don't see celebrities without their makeup on. We don't see them without their airbrushing on the cover of the magazines. We don't see that mother who seemingly has perfect children at home pulling her hair out. We don't see that loving couple that are just so engrossed in each other having a spat at home. People tend to show forth their best when they're out in public. And we are comparing ourselves at our worst to their best. We can't compare to that. We can't measure up. But God hasn't called us to be anybody else. He has a specific calling on each and every one of you. He has a specific plan, and it's to give you hope and a future, not to keep you beaten down. He said that He has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and a sound mind. So those negative names that we are calling ourselves or letting others call us are not of God. That is not the destiny He has called for you. Stand up and walk in the power God has already placed in you. Shed off that robe of dysfunction and put on His grace. Let God change your name. It starts with you. You have to make a choice not to live under someone else's thumb. You have to wake up, make that choice to hold your head up high, look people in the face. You have heard the saying, fake it till you make it. It feels false at first, but one day you'll look up and realize you're just not fearful anymore. You'll realize you just shook that person's hand and you looked them in the eye and you did not inwardly cringe. You'll turn around and find yourself helping someone else through the same situation that you found yourself in previously. Because God does not allow us to go through difficult times without turning it around for good, either to bless us or to bless somebody else. You have so much to offer this world. It's time to tap into that instead of pushing it away. You've heard the song, This Little Light of Mine. I'm telling you to let your light shine. It's inside of you, it is. You may have been putting it under a bushel, but it's still there. It may not be as bright as it once was, but let God breathe on you and let Him fan that flame once again. What is your name? It's time to take that name tag off that someone else gave you and put on the one that God has for you. His ways are perfect and His plan is good. I'm going to sing that little song, This Little Light of Mine, and if you wouldn't mind, just do it with me so I'm just not so silly by myself. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Hide it under a bushel, no. I'm gonna let it shine. Hide it under a bushel, no. I'm gonna let it shine. Hide it under a bushel, no. I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Go and let your light shine.